Welcome to Grand Sumo Breakdown,
the unofficial sumo podcast
for official sumo fans.
Welcome to Grand Sumo Breakdown. This is Ryan.
This is Jake.
And this is Mac.
And this is our episode where we're going to take a look at the results of the July tournament that happened just last month and compare it to what we predicted or simulated would happen for our Natsu Basho to kind of make up for the canceled Natsu Basho in May. Since both of these tournaments were based off the same Bansuke, we thought it would be kind of a fun little thought experiment to see kind of how those two things lined up. But there is a major caveat to that, which I'll let Jake dive into.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to let you get out of the intro without saying this here, but as I've mentioned several times when we've discussed our results, and especially when we're comparing them to what really happened, we basically came up with percentages based on formulas and extra data and witches' omens and things like that, of like percentages of how likely certain things were to happen, and then we simulated it all out. So we didn't necessarily using dice. So this is a simulation would be a better word, I think, than prediction. Because, Mitakeumi won our simulation, but that's not exactly the same thing as saying that we pick him to win this tournament. So like Ishiura, I remember, was one of the big standouts from the Maegashira ranks in our simulation. Definitely didn't happen in reality.
Yeah, none of us in our preview for the July tournament were like, oh yeah, we think Ishiura is going to be a huge story this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So that's different than us saying that we got it wrong, Like it's less that we predicted Ishiura was going to get a bunch of wins and more like this is one possibility that's within the realm of expected reality. This is something that could happen. And I think based on the overall trends that we're going to get into, overall, I think we definitely simulated a Basho that the results were all realistic. The results all felt like they absolutely could happen. And that was kind of more what we were aiming for, rather than saying, like, we need to predict exactly how many wins this one guy will get and how many of this type of Kimarite he will execute, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. You still had a few abnormalities here and there, like the time warp that is Kaisei, the
Mono-E machine.
Mono-E machine that was Kaisei.
So just because I don't want to have to I don't want to have to like blurt it out every time I say any number. I'm just tossing this at the beginning, a disclaimer that, the same sort of disclaimer I bring up every friggin' time we discuss this tournament.
I think it's still fun to just kind of look to see what did the simulation get right?
Mm-hmm.
How close was it to the actual thing? Even though we got exactly what we wanted from the simulation, which was, could we make a realistic tournament happen via our computer? Not will we predict exactly what will happen?
Yeah. So like I said, trends, like overall stuff, when discussing the Basho as a whole, I think we did pretty all right on that. Individuals, all over the place.
Yeah. So let's start with where our simulation kind of had to start, which is the Torikumi, because in order to simulate any match, you have to figure out what those matchups are. So the first thing I wanted to look at was just how many total matches in the tournament did we predict? And that's going to be different based on the number of Rikishi that go Kyujo, when they go Kyujo, and all of those things. But pretty much our simulation ended up having 310 total matches, and the July tournament that actually took place had a total of 304 total matches. And the reason for that being is the July tournament actually had more Kyujo earlier and more often than our simulation had, so you're going to see less matches overall. Daily, we were always within at least one match, total matches that occurred on a day for every single day. And actually, I think more often than not, we had the same number of matches like on a given day that the actual tournament had.
It also depends a little bit on if it's an odd or even number of Kyujo, because if only one guy goes Kyujo, you still have the same number of matches per day. They just yank up a guy from Juryo. But if you have two guys go Kyujo, then you're down to 20 matches instead of the normal 21 matches on a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of Juryo, let's kind of talk about the total number of Juryo call-ups. Just just something interesting. So we had a total of 5 matches in our simulation where we had Juryo Rikshi pulled up to have a match with a Makuuchi Rikshi, and that happened a total of 10 times in the July tournament. But I think the most important thing to look at for the Torikumi is just how many actual matchups did we get correct that we thought that our simulation said would happen. How many of those actual like head-to-head matchups happened in the July tournament? And you know what? We started off pretty damn well. Day 1, we predicted all 21 matches that happened on day 1 would occur. And we actually, every single match on day 1 is what our Torikumi said would be day 1, which is fantastic for me. Makes me feel real good. After that, we never got over like the 50% mark for like what I'm going to call a bullseye, which is like this matchup happened and it happened on the day we said it would happen. So there's two things we're going to look at: the percent bullseye, which I just explained, and just percent hit, which is like this matchup happened, but it didn't happen on the same day our simulation said it would happen. So as you go through days 1 through 15, it looks really good for like the total number of matchups we thought would happen. Pretty much, I would say through day 8, where we had a minimum of 75% of those matches actually taking place. And then once you get to day 9 and lower, that's when we're either just around 50% or lower. And really, that's going to be because the further you get into the tournament, the more a Rikshi's record is taken into account in determining who they are going to face more than their rank. And so, like we said, our simulation is going to wildly vary with what actually happened in July on an individual level and individual results. So those matchups based on each Rikshi's record are going to be a lot harder to pin down for us in our simulation, because we had different guys with similar records than the July tournament would. So we're not going to be able to hit those late day matchups.
Especially day 14 and 15, our accuracy absolutely tanked.
Yeah,
because those are like specific Yusho race matchups, and a different Yusho race means completely different matchups.
Yeah, exactly. We went down to 26% hit rate on day 14 and a 37% hit rate on day 15. But we did so good in the first week of the tournament. We actually
you're pumping this up because this was the thing that you did.
It's also the thing where it was most accurate. So yes, I'm going to pump it up. We actually predicted 70% of the total matchups that would happen. Those actually happened. So I feel pretty good about that. And just about 1 out of every 5, it's 18.75%, but I'm going to round it up to 20%. Say 1 out of every 5 matches that occurred in the July tournament was a matchup that happened on the day we said it would happen. So I'm going to take that as a win overall for the simulation, especially that first week, where it's a lot, that's not going to be as variable. Like you get the Bansuke, and that's probably what it's going to be, except for things like Kakuryu going out on day 2 is really going to throw a wrench in things like that. So if we just take a look at our first 8 days, our overall hit percentage average was 87.35%. So first week, we really nailed the matchups that were going to be happening there. Whereas the second week, which we're going to take as days 9 through 15, it was an average of 49.4%. So on a given day, we only got half the matchups. But still, I'm going to take that as a win overall for the simulation.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially because the only thing that will mess with that is Kakuryu going Kyujo and stuff like that. Like that's really the only thing that tossed that out. But like there's a lot more that you can predict there, and as the records from one wrestler to the next sort of diverge between who's doing good and who's doing bad, it's not really until that second week that it matters.
Yeah.
And on those last couple days, like which day was it? I think on day 15, yeah, you got 37% of the matchups that you predicted would happen on day 15 happened at some point, but 0% bullseyes, because by that point, it's just completely based on record.
Yep, exactly. Just when I came into this exercise, I wanted to say, okay, everything that I can compare, I want to compare. So I've got a couple of columns for east winds that we predicted would happen versus like a Rikshi on the west side wins that they got, just for funsies, just to see. So our simulation had a total percentage of 44% of the wins came from the Rikshi that was fighting on the east side that day. Which means 56% of the wins came from the Rikshi on the west side that day. Kind of interesting to see that in the July tournament, it was pretty much flipped the other way, where 53% of the wins came from the Rikshi on the east side and 47% of the wins from the Rikshi came from the west side. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I am
But-
absolutely shocked. Both of them were close to 50%.
But still,
Oh, man.
fun to look at because I like numbers.
Who doesn't?
The
Yeah.
numbers are pretty slick.
But yeah, that pretty much wraps up everything with the Tori Kumi prediction, and we just kind of want to give ourselves a grade on how this would go. And I'm feeling pretty high on myself, but I also don't want to be labeled as just like a egotist by my fellow podcasters. So I'm going to give myself a solid B plus.
I think it's far too late for that.
It is far too late.
I actually I got to give you an A on this one. I know that this is only going to make you more unbearable, but especially the 100% bullseye on day one. Yeah, I think this was definitely the spot where it would be more our sumo knowledge coming into play as far as the prediction goes. Whereas everything that comes after this is going to have a lot more element of randomness to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't think there's much better that we could have done on this one, especially because the only problems we ran into at the beginning were due to injury.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm giving myself a B plus and not a full A is because the day 2 bullseye percentage dropped to 43%, and
And it never got any higher than that again, did it?
well, it never got any higher. But like coming into a tournament, they send out like the first 2 days of the Torikumi, so I should have been able to get like day 2 exactly right as well, because there still would be no differences between our simulated tournament and the actual tournament that happened. So like we know that Kakuryu was gone after day 1, and so that completely throws everything out of whack for day 3 and after. But day 2, I still feel like I wanted to get a higher percentage of bullseyes on that day. So I'll drop it a little bit to B plus. But you know what? If you're gonna give me an A, we'll take
No,
it.
no, you've convinced me. I think we got to go with an A.
Yeah, I was about to say, no, you talked yourself into a B plus. Well done, Ryan.
Let's compromise. Let's give him an A minus here.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
Room for improvement, but not a
room
ton.
room for improvement.
I will humbly accept this. And then just a couple of like overall trend things that don't fit into any other categories. I'm just going to knock them out right now. Just kind of curious, like how many Rikshi did we predict would get a Kachikoshi versus how many Rikshi actually got a Kachikoshi in the July tournament? So we predicted that there would be 22 Kachikoshi Rikshi. There were actually 21 Kachikoshi Rikshi. Kind of interesting how they split it even. I mean, not interesting. That's kind of where you'd figure it, but it was exactly even on the number of Kachikoshi Rikshi in the July tournament, with 21 winning records, 21 losing records, where we had 22 winning records and 20 losing records.
Yeah, and that just means that we had a couple guys that ran away with a lot of wins. So there were or excuse me, other way around. Guys who had a lot of losses. So there were more guys who barely got Kachikoshi and several guys that got big Makekoshi, more so than the actual tournament.
Yeah. And then I was also just curious, like, of the people that we said would get a Kachikoshi, how many actually did get a Kachikoshi? So of the 22 that we said would get a Kachikoshi, 12 of them did get Kachikoshi. I'm not going to go through the whole list of everybody there. So 55% was the simulation's percentage of correctly guessing who would have a winning record. And it was also 55% for who it correctly predicted would have a losing record, as it correctly predicted 11 Rikshi to get a losing record.
I think anything over 50% means that we did an okay job there.
I think so.
That's kind of how I think about it. Like when I think about like football, like football experts that make like picks of who's going to win every like game every week. Like honestly, if you're over 50%, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm gonna take over 50% or around 50%. Spoiler alert: around 50% is a good number. You don't necessarily have to be at it or above it. And then just kind of curious, like overall trend of like where the wins. Jake, you could probably explain this chart like better than I can. Just like how many Rikishi got each like win total. So like how many Rikishi got 13 wins in this tournament versus how many got 13 in July? How many got 8 wins in this tournament versus how many got 8 wins in July? And I think this one ended up pretty good overall.
Oh yeah, I think this is one of the charts that I think best exemplifies that overall we did okay.
The overall trend that we're kind of talking about here.
Exactly. So from the numbers of all the possible numbers of wins, you could get 0 wins all the way up to 15 wins, right? That's 16 different numbers.
Yep.
8 of those we guessed correctly that there would be. We had the same number of people got that number of wins in our simulation as in reality. So in 13 wins, we thought there'd be 1. In July, there was 1. 12 wins, we thought there would be 1. There was 1. We got those right. 11 wins, we thought there'd be 4. There were actually 3. So that's only 1 off. So overall, though, this chart shows that we had a decent distribution compared to reality. We did get the only one that we had that was more than 2 off was 10 wins. We thought there would be 3. In reality, there were 7, which was just, that on its own makes it kind of an outlier of a tournament in July.
Yeah, there were 12 Rikishi with double-digit winning records.
Yeah, that is definitely above the norm. I wish we, oh man, it would have been fun to look up the data and see like how many there are normally 10 plus or whatever. I don't know. That sounds like a bunch of work.
And then also
and we're done doing the work.
Rikishi with double-digit losing records. Sorry. So 12. So over half the Rikishi had like I would say like an extremely good or extremely bad record with double-digit wins or losses, which you'd kind of I think you would expect that number to swing more towards like the between 6 and 9 wins.
Exactly. Yeah. In a normal tournament, you'd expect there to be more guys between 6 and 9. Our distribution came out a little bit more towards a standard tournament than the actual July. Again, I wish I had numbers that I could back up exactly how much so, but still, I still think this is a chart that shows that we did pretty okay with the overall trend, the overall distribution of wins among all wrestlers.
Yeah. So let's move on to kind of just like an individual Rikishi comparison. Like, so for each of the 42 Rikishi in the Makuuchi division, how does our simulation compare to what they actually did in the July tournament? And this table is the reason why this episode is getting to you a lot later than we probably thought it would be, because this table is a beast. We looked at every single thing you could look at. We looked at how many total matchups did we predict an individual Rikishi would have. We looked at, of those matchups that we predicted, how many correct outcomes of those matches did we predict would happen. And of those outcomes, how many times did we correctly pick the winning or losing Kimarite? So there is a lot of different things that go into this for 42 different Rikishi. It takes a lot of time to put that together. So that's why this episode's a little bit later than we probably would have liked, and some other extenuating circumstances. But yeah,
we got 33 columns in this bad boy.
Yeah. So I was going to start off talking about the like total matches again, because that was kind of my field with the Torikumi, and just talk about like on an individual basis, who did we best guess like their total matchups. And kind of, I would say unsurprisingly, Kakuryu. We predicted both of his matchups would occur. It just so happened that he pulled out afterwards. And so, yeah, that was fairly easy. So we're going to throw Kakuryu out. He was 100% hit rate. That doesn't count.
So that one's a gimme.
No.
Yeah. So the next highest Rikishi, I think it makes sense. It's Hakuho. He was hopped rank Yokozuna. We predicted out of his 13 total matches that he had, we predicted he would have 12 of those head-to-head matchups. So a 92% hit rate for Hakuho's matches. And of those matches that we predicted would happen, 62% of those we had occurring on the exact correct day. But it makes sense because from a Torikumi making aspect, Hakuho is the top guy, and they follow a fairly regular pattern for who they're going to face on what day. So they're going to face the Komusubi West, and then Maegashira 1 East, Maegashira 1 West, Maegashira 2 East, Maegashira 2 West. And then once they're done with all of the lower ranked guys and they start facing the rest of the guys in the Sanyaku schedule, it's going to be Komusubi East, Sekiwake West, Sekiwake East, Ozeki West, Ozeki East. So it's very easy to figure out Hakuho's schedule, which is why he had the most hits and the most bullseyes. Some of those Kyujo that occurred is what threw off the order for the most part. After him, the next best guy that we predicted their matches was actually Koto Shoho. He had 15 matches, and we correctly predicted that he would face 13 of those 15 guys that he would face. We only got 20% of them on the exact correct day, but still 87% of his matchups that would occur, we predicted would occur.
Wow. And that one, there's no extenuating circumstances to that one. That one just happened to be the one that we got the best.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right, we got two.
There's no, like when you're a Maegashira 15, there's nowhere near as much of a pattern as the Yokozuna. The only thing I can think of that may have helped us get him better is the Kotos had a limited number of guys they could face at the bottom. So maybe that's kind of... Yeah, but then again, some of the other Kotos are not very high on this list at all. So that may not be a factor at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're going to see here, like the top 10 Rikishi that we predicted, all of them except for Koto Shoho were in the Joy, and those are the easier to predict matches. So Koto Shoho somehow being the number 3 Rikishi here is really weird, but everybody else in top 10 is like Asanoyama, Shodai, Daisho, Okinoumi, Endo. They're all like, wow, there's a bunch of guys at like 80% of the correct matches predicted.
Yeah, guys that we got 10 out of 15 on. Yeah, there's a handful.
So yeah, a lot easier to predict the things in the Joy. And obviously the total percentage hit and bullseyes is going to be the same as what we already discussed. 70% of the matchups we said would occurred, and 1 out of every 5 bullseyes. So 1 out of every 5 matches that occurred, we said would be that matchup on that particular day. And so who did we do really bad on predicting?
I'm going to take a wild guess. Was it the M17 Terunofuji?
Yes.
Oh, I got it. Wow, I feel great.
Wow, Mac, you're a wizard.
Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. So we only predicted 33% of his matchups, 5 of his total 15 matchups. And that really hurts us because we said his simulation said that he was going to be Kyujo after day 7. There's just a whole second week of matchups that we would miss on. And even if we had him staying in, it wouldn't be all that great because he ended up fighting a lot of higher ranked Rikishi that our simulation probably would not have had him fight.
Oh, yeah. And
it's kind of the same story as Ishiura, where now he's our second worst, but he's above 50%. He's at 53% of hit percentage.
That's still, it's still top half. That's not bad.
Yeah. But so we had him doing really good in the first week. So he was facing a lot of higher ranked guys in the second week, whereas in reality, he was doing bad the whole way through and never even sniffed fighting anybody in the Sanyaku ranks, which is why his percentage is quite a bit lower than like some of the other guys on this.
Yeah, and shockingly, of the 8 of his matches that we got correct, 7 of them were in the first 7 days.
Yeah.
So very obvious that like the second week matchups where we thought he'd be moving up the Bansuke, those are the ones that we got wrong.
Yeah.
So not a shocker there.
Yeah. So we'll move on and talk about like, all right, so you can figure out who's going to face who. Can you figure out who is going to beat who? And
hey, real quick, the point I was looking for that I completely lost when I closed a window.
Yeah.
Guys with Kyujos tended to be higher on our list here, because if you like, for example, Abi, we got 70% of his matches right. he only had 7 actual matches before he pulled out, but those were all first week matchups, the easier ones to predict.
Yep.
So guys that pulled out before, Abi pulled out on day 7. Also in the top half of our accuracy list, we have Koto Nowaka who pulled out, Takakesho who pulled out. Those guys
Koto
pulled
Yuki.
out before. Actually, I think Koto Yuki, where did he land?
Day 13,
He's
I think is when he
right.
pulled out.
So like 3 Kyujos in a row, like around the top 15, Koto Nowaka, Koto Yuki, and Takakesho.
There he is. Okay, yeah. Because those guys pulled out before the more difficult days, they kind of drifted towards the top of the list artificially.
So yeah, let's move on and talk about, all right, we know who's going to fight, but can you figure out who is actually going to win those matches? That's where I kind of go back to like being around 50% is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we just look at like who did we most accurately predict their matchups, I'm not even going to say take a wild guess because you guys are probably all looking at the same exact table I'm looking at.
Nope, I've moved it over.
You would never guess that our best guy at predicting outcomes was Shohozan.
Wait, what?
Yeah, of the matches that we said would occur, we correctly predicted 83% of his outcomes. So we predicted that he would have 3 matches that ended up in a win for him. And we correctly predicted that all 3 of those would be a win in our simulation. And then we also correctly predicted like 9 of his matchups that ended up in a loss for him. We correctly predicted in our simulation that 7 of those matches would also be losses.
For this calculation, we're tossing out the matchups that we did not predict to happen.
Correct. So yeah, this
for
is just
Shohozan, we're starting with 12 because we predicted correctly 12 matchups of his.
yes.
So of
exactly.
those 12,
we
went.
correctly predicted 83%.
Yeah, exactly.
If you wanted to say like, no, you didn't correctly predict those matches, these just count as losses for you, well, then Shohozan is still at 67% correct outcome predicted for him, and he's still the top guy on that list. If you
so that's still
that.
10 matches, whether you count it out of 12 or out of 15. 10 of his matches, we guessed the correct, or we simulated the correct winner for that matchup.
Right. And because the results, this is like the first item where the results are based on the roll of a die. This is where it starts getting random on who's in your top 10 because you can't predict it. It's the die who said it. So our top 5 guys in like correct outcomes predicted for like matches we said would happen are Shohozan, Kiribayama, Chiyomaru, Hakuho, Asanoyama. Kind of all over the Bansuke in that top 5 list.
Yutakiyama and Aoyama also included in that in a tie for 5th or tie for 4th.
So all of those guys, of the matches we said would happen, we correctly predicted 2/3 of those outcomes. And so if we go to the bottom of that list, once again, you have the outlier Kakuryu there because he obviously went 0-2 with his day 1 loss and Fusen. We predicted him to start 2-0 because, you know, he's a Yokozuna and they tend to do that. So he's at the bottom list. We didn't get any of his outcomes correct. So if we eliminate him, then your bottom 5 guys are going to be Koto Nowaka, Teru no Fuji, Nishikigi, Shima no Umi, Tochi no Shin, and it looks like Kaisei to round out like your bottom 5. And so the highest person there would be Kaisei and Tochi no Shin. We predicted 30% of their outcomes versus like Koto Nowaka, we predicted 12.5% of his outcomes. And once again, that's just of matches we said would happen. If we just kind of look overall at all of their matches, how many correct outcomes did we predict, then your bottom guy is Teru no Fuji, because obviously we predicted him to have 0 wins.
Yes.
And so we only got 1 of his outcomes correct, which is his loss to Takayasu. And then, yeah, it's just going to be the same guys down there at the bottom. It's a fairly similar list, just the percentages go down because we're taking into account the full amount of people that they fought.
Yeah, so overall, though, here's another overall trend number. If you take of the matchups that we correctly predicted were going to happen, the outcome was correctly predicted for around 47% of them. So we're just under 50%, but I don't know. I feel okay that we got close to 50%. But that's something where
are you seeing 47? I'm seeing 49%.
That there's a typo in that box. It's not taking a true average. So I'm just selecting all the numbers in column O.
That's it. Simulation ruined. All done. Throw these away. These are garbage. This is crap.
Toss it in the drain. So yeah, Kakaryu being a 0% drags us down a little bit, but even still, we're just under 50.
All right, let's throw Kakaryu out of this. I want to.
I already got that. So without him, our percent is
good try.
47.78.
Yeah, we call that 48%, Jake. Round that up to the higher number.
Yeah, and if you round that up properly, but we got half of them.
Yeah, exactly. Which, when it's based on a die roll, that's really all you can hope for. Maybe you hope to be on, like, instead of 48%, 52%. But really, as long as we're not at like 30%, I call that a win.
We did okay. This isn't one where we're gonna earn an A- or anything from me. I think this is one where we probably get like a C+ or a B- in my opinion. Because
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. Like we did okay. Certainly a pass, but for this kind of thing, I feel like you should get better than 50%. If you were just like before every match in the tournament just said, I think that guy's going to win. I think you should be able to beat 50% fairly easily, because even if the bottom 2/3 of the Banzuke can be kind of a coin toss, the top third of the Banzuke, all the Yokozuna matches and the Ozeki matches, I think you should be able to beat 50%.
Yeah.
But even still, it's going to be close. But I feel like if we had beaten like 52 or 53%, I would have been super happy. Yeah. For now, I'll just have to be kind of happy.
We'll blame Fleric. He was the one throwing the die.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I like that.
And so, Jake, why don't you kind of take over from here and talk about like each Rikshi's actual like individual record and how we did with that.
Yeah, so this was a disclaimer again. This isn't necessarily something that counts as like accurate or not, but it's still worth measuring. So we took how many wins did somebody actually get, how many wins did they get in our prediction, and how many and what the average ended up being. So for, let's see, how many did we get right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys we predicted exactly. We simulated exactly the correct number of wins. And for most other guys, we were kind of all over the board, but generally, almost nobody was above 5, with 2 very notable exceptions. Those being the obvious,
we've already talked about
Terunofuji and Kakaryu.
Yes.
So the overall average, we were within 3 wins, of it getting them exactly what actually happened. If you take out those outliers, we get down to more like 2 3/4 wins, which I don't know. Still, it's something that's not necessarily indicative of our performance because there's so much die rolling going on in here. But that's just an overall measure of how close we got to everybody's individual performance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do you want to talk about Kimarite here, Ryan?
Yeah, let's move over to Kimarite. We'll start on the individual level, kind of continue on that train, and then we'll go over to like kind of your overall trends.
Yeah, let's do it that way because the trends we did better on, and the numbers are more impressive looking at those.
Yeah. So for the Kimarite, kind of similar to the outcomes, this was once again just based completely on a die roll, and it was kind of based on like the top 10 Kimarite that a Rikshi tends to win by and tends to lose by, and did like a weighted average thing to kind of try to find a way to figure out what Kimarite they would be using.
Yeah, based on the 2 competitors in the match, we basically used their history to create a table to roll on. Once we figured out who the winner was, we would roll on the secondary table to see what the technique was.
Yeah. And so this one, I didn't really care about if the Kimarite happened in a matchup that we said would happen. This is just more about, did they use the techniques we thought they would use? So the Rikshi, we did the best at predicting which techniques they would do. It is Tochi no Shin. We correctly predicted, of his 10 wins, we correctly predicted 4 of those winning Kimarite, but in his 5 losses, we accurately predicted that he would lose those 5 ways, which is actually fairly amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have a little bit of the benefit on Tochinoshin because you know that he's going to try and get into a grappling match. So like his moves are generally more grappling focused.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when we say 5 out of 5,
It's
that
not
means
really
like
that good because we actually predicted like 11 losses for him. So we had a pool of 11 losing Kimarite to choose from for the 5 losing Kimarite.
Yeah, fair point. But like the way that we're going at this is like, let's say that he has 3 wins by Yorikiri and we only predicted 2 or that we only predicted he would have 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Then we would count that as 2 correct.
Right.
So yeah, it's not saying that he used 10 different Kimarite and we correctly guessed 4 of them. If we were doing that, yeah, we would have just like guessed Yorikiri and we would have nailed it.
Yeah.
But still, like that's kind of where that calculation is coming from.
Yeah. So for Tochinoshin, of his 15 matches, we correctly predicted either the winning or losing Kimarite in 60% of those matches. And this one, I mean, there's 82 different Kimarite to choose from. Yes, there are a handful that are used more often than others, but I mean, you're still choosing from a pool of 82. So we don't really have too many guys above 50% where we correctly predicted the Kimarite. So the order of everybody that had 50%, so it was Tochinoshin, then Hakuho, Endo, Yutakayama, Takanosho, Kiribayama, Kageyaki, Teritsuyoshi, Kakuryu. Well, Kakuryu doesn't count.
Kinda.
Because we counted the Fusen loss. We said he would lose by Fusen in the tournament because we had to pull out in our simulation, and he did lose by Fusen. It was just a lot sooner than we thought. So it counts as 50%. Fusen's count, damn it. And Koto Nowaka rounding out our total number of guys at 50% or above. And if we kind of look at the reverse of that, once again, we have our sore thumb sticking out in Teru no Fuji, where we predicted 0 of the Kimarite.
Well, we predicted he would get 0 wins.
Oh, yeah, 0 wins.
Yeah, he went like 0-6 and then pulled out in our simulation or something like that.
Yep.
So we actually got one of his losing Kimarite right. I don't remember what it was, but whatever he lost to against like Takayasu or Shodai, we predicted he
both
would
of them were Yorikiri. So
Yeah.
that was that was almost a freebie.
That was a gimme. But kind of interesting, Shohozan, where we predicted 83% of his outcomes correctly, or like 67% if you take the ones matchups we didn't predict as just losses. Conversely, he's the second from the bottom on the list of Kimarite predicted at 13.33%, tied with Takeda Fuji. So whereas we were pretty good at saying whether or not Shohozan would win, we did a really bad job of saying what he would win or lose by.
Shohozan, yeah, I mean, and part of that is probably due to the fact that he is a wild man and he is all over the place.
Yeah.
It's somebody like Aoyama, where did he fall?
He's towards the bottom.
He's towards the that's
he's
interesting.
Probably like bottom.
Well,
bottom
then he's
half,
a crappy example. But Tochinoshin is somebody. We'll use Tochinoshin as an example. You kind of know how his matches are going to look. You have a general idea. So he's a little bit easier to predict Kimarite for. Shohozan, I guess it's not shocking to me that he's near the bottom just because his matches can go anywhere. Mm-hmm. I kind of would have expected Enho to be towards the bottom too, but he's like middle of the pack.
Yeah. And I also kind of wanted to track, of the Kimarite that we said this Rikshi would use, did we get any right? Like, did they use it against this opponent? So turns out Yutakayama, we did a pretty decent job with him. He was in the 53% of Kimarite used in our simulation. Actually, he used in the Basho or lost by in the Basho. But we also got, looks like 26.67% against the correct opponent for him. So this is a percentage of the correct Kimarite that he had, and how many of those were against the correct opponent. So it's not like we predicted 26.67% of his matchups completely accurately. I don't think. I put this number together and now I'm confused. Jake, explain my work for me.
So 26.67% of 15 means 4 matches out of his 15 total matches.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
had the correct opponent, the correct Kimarite, and the correct winner.
Yes. Okay.
So
Thank you,
that's
Jake.
when you have all those caveats, all those things you got to get right. I think getting any is is pretty cool.
Yeah.
For most guys, we had a 0 on this, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There were total of obviously 42 Rikshi, 25 guys. We did not get a single correct winning Kimarite against the correct opponent. The only other guy over 20% was Kiribayama. And Hakuho was in that top 3 as well. Hakuho, I mean, I feel like it's just a lot easier to predict everything with Hakuho because you know who his matchups are going to be, and then you know he's just going to win those matchups.
Yeah. So there's a higher pool. There's a higher number of matchups to pick when you narrow it down to did the Kimarite come out correct as well.
Yeah. And so let's round out this gigantic table and talk about perfect matches. That is, we said that this matchup would occur. Not only did we say that matchup would occur, we said it would occur on this particular day. Not only did we say it would happen on that particular day, we said who would win. Not only did we say who would win, we said which Kimarite they would use. That's quite a difficult thing to predict. But we had 304 chances, so we stumbled into 4 of them.
Yeah.
Well,
For a
had to have
total
at least
percentage of 0.67%. So 1 out of every 200 matches, we exactly predicted what would happen in that match. Sorry,
Ooh, no, I think
simulated.
I
We
think that
exactly
should be
simulated.
double that because 4 is definitely more than 1% of 300 and some.
Are you saying our math is wrong?
I'm saying your math is wrong. You put this one together.
That's fair.
There, times 2. Boom. There we go. 1.3%.
All right. It's not 0.
1 out of every 100 matches, we exactly simulated correctly.
Including, you got any examples for us? Let's see. I know
do.
Hakuho has one.
So yeah, on day 6, we simulated that Hakuho would face Kiribayama, that he would beat Kiribayama, and he would do so via Yorikiri, which is exactly what happened in that matchup. Chiyomaru, we were the most accurate with because we had 2 perfect matches for Mr. Chiyomaru. Let me pull that up real quick as I just kind of vamp and stall as I get to his section, where on day 2, he would fight Koto Shogiku and lose via Yorikiri. And on day 5, we predicted he would fight Nishikigi and lose via Oshidashi.
There you go. Not surprising that these are kind of common techniques for all of the ones that ended up being perfect ones. But
yeah.
But regardless, I think it's really cool that it happened even once.
Yeah. And so the final perfect matchup that we had was Sada Naomi versus Shohozan on day 1, where we predicted that Sada Naomi would win via Yorikiri. It looks like all of the ones that we correctly predicted were either Yorikiri or Oshidashi.
Shocking.
Well, go figure.
Yeah. So before we give ourselves a grade on how we did for the Kimarite, because those numbers don't look all that great, but here is some stuff that's a little bit more, a little bit more indicative of our overall scheme and like how good our programming accurately reflected reality. So what I did was I took all the top Kimarite used in this simulation and found the ratio of how often were they used in the simulation to the real Basho. And most of the numbers came out pretty close, somewhat close to 1, like, within somewhere between 0.8 to like 1.2. So Yorikiri, let's just go over like a couple of the most common ones. So the most common technique used in our simulation was Yorikiri, and it was used 86% of how often it was used in the real tournament. So that means that we predicted slightly less Yorikiri than what really happened. The Oshidashi, the next obviously most common technique, we predicted it would be used 60% more than it actually was used. So that seemed like an outlier to me. So what I did is next I went and I compared the real July Basho compared to the last 6 real Basho. This is the same sort of technique that I would use for when we're doing our Namiyama stats to like see that's our program that determines how does somebody's wrestling style, their winning kimarite, how does that compare to the average of everybody?
Right.
So basically, I just treated this Basho as a wrestler and compared it to the last 6 tournaments. And what I found was that this tournament used, there was 20% fewer Oshidashi than we would have expected. And 30% more Yorikiri than we would have expected. Or excuse me, 20% less Oshidashi, 10% more Yorikiri than we would have expected. So that means that this was a Yorikiri heavy tournament, and there was less Oshidashi than we would have expected. So that kind of makes sense then. If this was lower on the Oshidashi in real life and our tournament was closer to the average, then yeah, that makes sense that our tournament would predict more Oshidashi than really happened. The other big weird one here is Tsukio Toshi. Normally that doesn't happen nearly as often as it happened in the real July tournament. It happened 40% more than we would have expected it to. And as a result, yeah, our simulation was pretty low on that one. I don't know exactly how Tsukio Toshi is perceived, but do you guys have the same impression that that's kind of looked at as a sloppy, haphazard sumo technique?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's how Tokushoryu won his Yusho. He had 6 straight Tsukio Toshi.
That's right.
Pushed to the edge and just was able to like sidestep the guy and throw him down.
So yeah, the fact that that was used 40% more often, and
it's more
Hataki
defensive than offensive.
Yeah, and Hataki Komi was also used 20% more often in July than we would have expected. So both of those kind of like sloppy, haphazard techniques were used a lot more often than we would have expected, and therefore in our simulation, it kind of came in low. So we only predicted. Let's see, Tsukio Toshi in our simulation was 40% lower than in the real July, and Hataki Komi was 15% lower than the actual July. So yeah, both of those techniques happened more than we would have expected, which makes sense that our simulation had them fewer times. Both of those techniques you can probably chalk up to at least a little bit of the fact that, you know, we were coming into this tournament a little rusty after a long off season. But yeah, some of the other techniques that came up pretty often that we got the ratio approximately right. We had Uwate Nage. We simulated about 16% more than actually happened, but that's still pretty close considering it's the 5th most common technique used. Hiki Otoshi, we were within 10%. Okuridashi within 13%. One other outlier, and then I'll move on from this table. Tsukidashi. We only predicted it would happen, 60% less than it actually did. But I think it's fair to toss that one in the a little bit in the sloppy sumo bucket. However, it was only used 2% more often than a standard tournament. So that's one where I think we did actually kind of miss where the ratio should be.
Okay.
So it was used about as much as it normally is, but we were way low on our prediction.
Yeah. So you were kind of in charge of the Kimarite for the tournament. And so based on the stats that we're looking at on an individual level and an overall level, what grade would you give our simulation for accurately predicting the July tournament? Not for accurately making a plausible tournament, but just how did it do facing July?
Yeah, I think I would give it I'd give it kind of B-. That's kind of where I would put it. I think that we can develop this prediction system a little bit better. One reason that it could have been a little bit off that might help improve accuracy. Different wrestlers have vastly different numbers of kimarite that they've used in their careers. So to cancel that out, we basically only accounted for the top 10 winning and top 10 losing techniques that each guy had faced. And I think that's something that we could expand on. We did it that way in particular because then we can make it the same size table for everyone, kind of a lazy programmer trick. But like, Kime Dashi is not on almost anybody's list. That's Terano Fuji's signature, like lift up by the elbows kind of move. And yeah, that happened more often than we simulated that it would because it happened at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things like that. Kote Nage was overrepresented in our tournament. Same with Oshi Taoshi and Yori Taoshi. And I think, again, that's because they're on most people's top 10 lists, but that doesn't mean that they actually happen all that often.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna say B minus for my own work on this. What do you guys think?
I'd give it a B. I'd give it a solid B.
I was kind of thinking around that range, like C plus. So we'll average that out to a B minus for all three of us, because I'm just how poorly we kind of did on the individual level. The trends were pretty good, but the individual level was pretty bad. But once again, that's so random. So yeah. We'll go with B minus.
One other thing I think if we were to do this again would be, I think instead of just picking a Kimarite off a list, I think it would be it might get us better results if we were to group certain things together, like a Yorikiri and a Yori Taoshi. You could group those together and say one of those things happened, and then roll another die to determine like the percentage between those, how often one happens versus the other. Like that way we could maybe get a better idea of how accurately we can predict or simulate how often is it a grappling match, or how often is it a pushing match, or something like that. That we if we grouped them into categories that were more indicative of how the match happened, that might help us get better results. But that would have complicated each match and made it take longer than it did, and it took so long already that was kind of a pain.
Yeah. All right, Mac. So why don't you take us through some of the more kind of miscellaneous items throughout the tournament?
I could do that. So to delve into this a little bit further, as Jake was going through all the Kimarite and Ryan was doing all the Torikumi, who was going to simulate who was going with the matches, I tried to predict who would go Kyujo and who would have basically a healthy tournament, which is definitely subject to change. So for our simulation, each Rikshi were given a certain amount of health, and then depending on their performances and their trends or anything that we noticed, like, hey, this guy did really well, he's looking good, that all contributed to how they would perform for the rest of the tournament. And as we found out, Terunofuji did absolutely horrible in the simulation and completely blew everything out of the water in the actual tournament. But for our simulation and comparison to the July tournament, the actual number of Kyujo was pretty close. So our simulation predicted 4 total Kyujo, and the number that actually occurred was 6. So an accuracy of about 66%. It's above 50, so I'm happy with that.
It's within the realm of what we would kind of expect, and,
Yeah.
and I think that's, like we've been talking about, that's one of the ways that we judge if we did good or not.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and coming off of a long layoff with not a lot of training, there was expectations of a higher injury count, so it makes sense that there was more in the actual July tournament than the simulation.
Right. But then we broke it down into like, okay, well, we got 4 versus the 6, but who went Kyujo? And as we've kind of been alluding to in our previous discussions, Terunofuji was the first to go Kyujo in our simulation. And then behind him was Takakeisho, then Kakuryu, and Takayasu, versus what actually happened in the tournament, which was Kakuryu, then Abi, Koto no Waka, Takakeisho, Hakuho, and then Koto Yuki. So it kind of was all over the board, but oddly enough, we still got 33% of the actual Kyujo members correct.
Yeah, and
Takakeisho and Takakeisho and Kakuryu. There you go.
Kakuryu, yeah.
And I think out of 42 people, when 6 go out and you accurately predict 2 of them, I think that's better than like that 33% number would lead you to believe. I think that's pretty good that we got a couple of those right on.
I think it means that we did a decent job of getting our of weighting how heavily injury should count for certain people, because both Yokozuna, obviously, and then also Takakeisho, we kind of inflated their chance of injury based on what we knew about them.
Right.
And I think that's something that getting some credit for that beyond just saying we got 30%. I'm all for pumping ourselves up a little bit for that.
Yeah, but then to go kind of deeper into that, just to kind of further say, okay, well, how accurate could we get this? We went down to the day that the Kyujos occurred. We may not have gotten the exact person on the correct day, but we did simulate. So day 7 was Teruno Fuji's Kyujo. Day 11 was Takakeisho. Day 13 was Kakuryu. And day 14 was Takayasu. That was for the simulation. In the actual tournament, Kakuryu was day 2, Abi day 5, Koto no Waka day 8, Takakeisho day 12, Hakuho day 13, and Koto Yuki day 14. So for accuracy on the correct Rikishi going Kyujo on the correct day, that was 0. But the actual Kyujo occurring on the correct day was still 33%, day 13 and day 14.
Yeah, and we did get Takakeisho Kyujo within 1 day. So
that is true.
I think a little pat on the back for that one as well.
We guessed that he would stick it out for the beginning of the tournament, but not finish it.
Pretty much, yeah. So we had it kind of the opposite. We had him, okay, as soon as he is Makekoshi, he's going to get out of there. Whereas in the actual tournament, it was as soon as he's Kachikoshi, then he gets out of there.
Yes.
We had the right mindset, just flipped with wins and losses.
But overall, not bad. I think we did a fairly accurate job simulating that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Certainly within, certainly fitting our goal of having a tournament within the realm of what could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Then we can break it down into the number of mono-E's, and there were a lot more of those in the simulation.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing that we had like the least amount of info on which to like simulate an accurate tournament as well.
And to that point, our simulation predicted 18 mono-E's throughout the whole tournament.
Yeah, that was the one thing, the only thing. We tried to like keep our integrity throughout the whole thing, but the mono-E chance was the only thing that we adjusted on the fly because we didn't like the results.
Yeah.
No.
So diving into that, we changed it after day 5. And so if you add up how many mono-E we had through day 5, it was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So half of them happened in the first 5 days, and then the other half happened in the final 10 days after we ratcheted down the number, how often those would occur.
Yeah,
there were actually 10, but there were 2 on day 5 with Ishiura and Kaisei.
Oh God, that's right. So yeah, there were 10 in the first 5 days.
10 in the first 5 days.
So that means that there were about 2 per day at that point. And then after that, on the final 10 days, we only had
less than 1 per day.
Yeah, exactly. So that we were still a little bit high, but again, this was something where we didn't have a ton of data gathering. Nothing nearly as specific and as hard as the data that we had for everything else.
Again, I feel like we can throw this squarely on Fleric for his dice rolling abilities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because even if you account for the percent that Kyujos or mono-E's were supposed to happen, it was still happening too often.
Yes.
It's very, very strange.
Because in the actual July tournament, there were 8, and they were really spaced out, really sporadic, except for day 9.
Yeah.
So the actual July tournament, day 9, there were 3 that were called, but in our simulation, before we made our adjustments, day 5, there were 4 called. So not that far off of the actual.
Still awful.
Yeah. But not completely outside the realm of possibility,
No, exactly.
which is what we are aiming for.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a day with more than 4 mono-E's, therefore we win.
Yes, that's a success. Average number of mono-E called per day for our simulation was about 1.2 versus actual for July was about 0.5. So, but again, we simulated 18, but 8 actually happened. So yeah, everything is going to be a little inflated.
Yeah.
Then if you broke down a little bit further, so then you had to break the Gumbai Dori, Torinao Oshi, or
Gumbai Sashiagi.
Yep, that's it. Thank you. I was like, hang on, I forget what the other one's called because I rarely ever hear it.
Yeah.
So looking at that comparison, these numbers were a lot closer than I thought they would actually be. So for percentage of call stands, our simulation was at about 33% of the time, but the actual tournament was 50%. So a little bit more favoritism on the Gyoji side, but not too far. Versus call reversed, simulation was at about 39% of the time, and the actual ratio was about 25. So again, it's not off by an obscene amount by any means. And then for Tori Naoshi's, this was our closest prediction. I really like this. Simulation was at about 28% of the time we had a Tori Naoshi, and actual was 25%. We were only off by 3% in that simulation.
And once again, we have to blame Fleric on this because
Oh, totally.
like the July tournament had 50% call stands. The way we set up the dice roll, it was a 1 through 3 on a D6.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it was a
So
D6.
it should have been 50% call stands in our simulation. Fleric just rolls high numbers.
Yeah, and then
Yes.
it should have been 33% call reversed, and then like 16% rematch.
Yes.
But
On that
I think this
D100,
is.
Didn't he roll like 86 like 5 times?
I
Oh, yeah,
mean,
but-
random clustering is not necessarily a problem. It was just kind of funny how it worked out more in favor of call reversed than it should have.
That's true.
But I think we did a even though the results didn't come out that way, I think the table that we created to roll the die on was pretty close.
Yeah.
And I would love to keep more data going through future tournaments just so that we can get better. But
yeah.
but 50% call stands, 25% reverse, 25% rematch. That is super easy numbers.
Yeah.
And I really hope that it
Yes.
sticks close to that, because that would make that part of simulation totally easy from now
Yeah.
on.
Moving forward, this is a good baseline.
So, Mac, for the Kyujo and Mono E, what do you feel our grade should be combined for those kind of two categories?
Combined for both of them, I would say a B- on that. The Mono E's were probably the biggest headache in that case, but by and large, I mean, looking at the actual breakdown comparison, I think they were really close. So I would say a B-.
Yeah.
I'd
Once
give you
again,
a little bit better than that. I'd say a B. Just the Kyujo thing, I think, came out better than you're giving us credit for there, Mac. I think that not only the fact that two of the guys that we gave elevated injury chance actually did pull out, I think that is an excellent thing to hang our hat on. And the Monoese, like, we adjusted on the fly and made it much more realistic. And I don't know. I think if we were to use the newer Mono E system over the course of a full tournament, I think that we would the numbers would show a little bit better.
all right. Yeah. I'll buy like a B-. I think I was going to be a little bit. I think I was going to be like probably like a C-, D+ for the Mono E.
Hey,
and
I
then
passed
like,
it, baby.
and then like a B or something for the Kyujo. So I'll average that out and we'll call it a B-.
I think
I'll take it.
the one part of this that wasn't good is something that we fixed, and that's the quantity of Monoes.
Yes,
So I think
agree.
that being able to fix that, even though, it still bugs me just a tiny bit that we adjusted our system on the fly, but we definitely improved it on the fly. So that's helpful to me.
So now let's take just kind of a look at the overall trends, which you really can't quantify, but just kind of the flow of the tournament. Just kind of compare the Yusho race, how that all look. And so when we look at the Yusho race, what we ended up with in this tournament was in the final day, we had an Ozeki, I believe 2 Sekiwake, and a Maegashira in the Yusho race. All could have won on day 4 or day 15. Jeez. And then for the actual July tournament, no, that was the actual July tournament. In the
Get it together, man.
simulation,
Come on.
in the simulation, we had a Yokozuna and Ozeki, a Sekiwake, and a Maegashira that all could have won the tournament on day 15. So I think that's actually fairly comparable. You're just replacing a Yokozuna with a Sekiwake. You have that surprise Maegashira coming in there that could win it on the final day. I think the Yusho, and like where the records ended up, like we had each tournament had 113-2 Yusho winner, 112-3 June Yusho winner, a couple of people at 11-4. I think when you look at it from that prospect, how the Yusho race, I think it was pretty close to what actually happened. It's not like we had like a 15-0 Hakuho Zensho Yusho wrapped up on day 13 with no drama. It was the same number of people around the same ranks that were all in it going into the final day. I think that Yusho race looked pretty good overall.
I would totally agree. Like the inevitable mid Maegashira hangers on that go into the final day mathematically still in the race were obviously different people. But you know, I think overall, like it felt like a Yusho race that was totally realistic. And it just happened to, the last couple matches happened to go a different way to lead to different people having different results. But you know, I think it was the Yusho race in particular felt very, if not accurate,
felt like an actual tournament.
It felt authentic, I guess is a better word for it.
We even had two of the correct Yusho contenders in Asanoyama and Mitake Yumi.
Yeah. I mean,
So
that's great.
Yeah, so I think as far as like the Yusho race goes, the simulation was highly accurate. If we look at kind of like just the performance of the Sanyaku ranks and how people did there, kind of what we ended up in the actual tournament was everybody in the Sanyaku ranks had a winning record with the exception of Kakuryu, who pulled out after day 2 after he fell on his ass and got a boo-boo on his elbow. What our simulation had, we had 2 Sanyaku Rikishi with losing record. We had Takakeisho, who we had a losing record and pulling out. We had Okinoumi 5-10. But other than that, we had a strong performing Sanyaku in this Basho, similar to what the simulation had. Kind of, if we look at the Maegashira, we had our surprising Maegashira and Terunofuji that actually came up and won it. In our simulation, that place was kind of taken by Sada no Umi, who ended up 11-4, but realistically had a chance to win a playoff on the final day if he had won his final match against Mitake Yumi at 12-3. So we had our surprise Maegashira contenders. I don't know, like the rest, haven't really dove too deep in to see how the rest shakes out. I mean, I think that's kind of encompassed by when we looked at how many Rikishi had like 10 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, and we were pretty happy with that. So I'd say that kind of overall what happened fairly similar as well.
Yeah, again, it's liking it to an actual tournament. You felt like we were actually simulating a real tournament, and it felt that way.
Yeah, I think that obviously, you know, looking at it with hindsight, there's certain things that we would do differently, but the overall trends of the Maegashira and the overall flow of how everything felt, I think that it was a good first effort for complete amateur programmers.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what are you guys gonna give ourselves for just like the overall trends and flows of this tournament? Because I'm prepared to throw us another A minus on that one, especially the Yusho race, nailing 2 of the competitors in there and kind of how it all shook out there, and the overall performance of the Sanyaku. Because I mean, we've seen ass Sanyaku tournaments where they've all done real poorly, and we definitely did not have that in the simulation or the real tournament. So I'm prepared to throw us an A or an A minus on like that front.
I'd agree with that. I think I'd go for an A minus. Just
Agreed. I'd agree with an A
just out
minus.
of pessimism, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Who wants an A? A minus is just so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
when I'm grading somebody else, I'm comfortable with saying an A. But if I'm grading something where I'm a big part of this part of it, yeah, maybe pessimism and all the things that are coming to mind that I would want to do differently.
Yeah. And so let's just kind of take a look at it overall. First, I want to take a look at who was our most accurately predicted Rikishi, and this is taking into account like how many of their matchups did we predict would happen? How many correct outcomes in those matchups did we predict would happen? How many correct Kimarite would predict would happen? Pretty much, we took all of those like percentages, added them together, and divided it by 3 as if all of those things were weighted equally, just to get a quick and dirty number for who was most accurately predicted. And so we have our number one guy, I think, unsurprisingly, is our Yokozuna Hakuho with a 69.23% overall percentage predicted, which I think to get one guy that close is pretty good.
Yeah, I do want to say I think this number is more indicative relative to other wrestlers than it is to say we got a 70% for Hakuho. Like that's less meaningful than saying we did much better for him than we did for somebody else.
Yes. And so our other guys that were above 60% were Kiribayama, Yutakayama, Asanoyama, and Endo. So Hakuho, he ended up with a 10-5 record. We predicted him to have 11-4 record. Kiribayama, he had a 6-9 record. Our simulation had him at 6-9. Yutakayama, he had a 5-10 record in July, and I believe he was 8-7 in our tournament. So I think a lot of what's carrying his high score is the Kimarite, because he was the highest guy with the correct Kimarite used against the correct Rikishi. And then Asanoyama, he had a 12-3 record June Yusho in our simulation. He had a 12-3 June Yusho in the real tournament.
I think he should get at least a bonus point or two for the June Yusho.
Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, taking that into account beyond just the raw numbers, I'm going to bump up Asanoyama. Since we got the exact record, we got the June Yusho, he's already at 60%. I would say he's probably our most accurately predicted Rikishi overall, because Hakuho, if we look at the trend of it, Hakuho was kind of struggling all the way through our simulation to an 11-4 record, where he picked up losses but just kept carrying through, whereas Hakuho in real life stormed off to a 10-2 record, got hurt, pulled out.
Yeah, I think he also has a slightly lower degree of difficulty. Yeah, I mean, even an Ozeki is still like, only one step down from Yokozuna as far as like how predictable their matchups are and how predictable stuff like that. Asanoyama, I would say, like, even though he's fourth in this numerically, yeah, I would agree with you. I'd say that if we were to say who did the most similar to our simulation, I would agree with Asanoyama.
Yep. And it's not going to shock anybody when we say our least accurate was Terano Fuji, who we had winless and pulling out of the tournament, when in reality, he won the whole damned thing. So no controversy, no conversation needed. Terano Fuji is the least accurately simulated Rikishi.
One other one I want to call out here is Mitaka Yumi, who's like in the 2/3 of the way down, like the lower half of the pack. Despite him only getting 2 fewer wins than we simulated, we were all over the place with his Kimarite. He's generally somebody that we refer to as kind of a meat and potatoes guy, but the way it shook out, we just did not predict how he would win and lose very much at all.
Yeah. And to kind of just follow up the other bottom 5 guys that we did poorly simulating, another non-surprise, Ishiura, who we had doing amazing, did not do amazing. Takada Fuji, Shimano Umi, and Kaisei for our least accurate simulated Rikishi. And so I kind of just wanted to do like an overall percentage, just combining the Kimarite, matchups predicted, and outcomes predicted. How did this simulation do? And that's where we're like, I mean, if you're predicting, you want to be at 50%. If you're rolling dice, you want to be around 50%. And we're at 47.5% overall with all of these things. And so that's where you want to be. It's a little bit below average on that overall grade. But and so that would lead me to believe that this was like a B minus simulation. And if we look at all of our grades that we gave ourselves an A minus, a C plus, a B minus, a B minus, an A minus. God, we didn't give ourselves any solid grades. So if we average all of those together, that's in that B minus area. And because I'm tired of pluses and minuses, I'm going to say that this is a B simulation.
All right.
Yeah, I like it. That's right where I would put us too. And I think most of the things that we would do differently are not mathematical, even though we have a bunch of things that we were, that we discussed.
We could totally
tweak
mathematically.
Yeah. But I think the things that we the number one area that I would love to do differently if this ever happened again is the
God, I hope
marketing.
it doesn't.
Yeah, me too. But like the marketing kind of things. I feel like if we, as the Basho went on, we added more fun things that were happening.
Mhm.
We had Ryan, help me remember who it was on Reddit who put together the videos for us. Those were
Oh,
awesome.
Conrad Metcalf.
That's right. Thank you. But yeah, so we have videos, and Tachi covered it. We had Bruce do write-ups for the matches.
I don't think Bruce would sign on to do that again.
No, I think what we would need to do is, now that we have the whole system set up, if they said that like the November tournament was in danger of being canceled, if we jumped on it like right now,
Yeah.
got everybody involved who helped out with last time, and like
JWags,
put out
we need another sick beat. Let's go.
exactly. Like, yeah, we had that awesome. Oh God, I forgot about the video that he put together. That was
Right?
hilarious. But like, I feel like it could be a more fun, more engaging community experience knowing what we know now. And I think that's something that would be the biggest and most impactful thing that we would do differently next time.
Yeah, and I still think what we had was fantastic. Getting that Tachi buy-in, getting those videos made, getting JWags to make that song. So I think, yeah, we could make that even better. But yeah, I
wouldn't call it a failure by any means.
Right.
Oh, no.
But I think that's where we have the most room for improvement.
Yeah. And so I think this episode is going to put the final bow on the Not So Basho. I think we can play that JWags song one more time for this episode.
Yes.
But I think at this point, there's no more reason for us to bring it up anymore. I'm sure we will, but this is going to be the last in-depth look at it, just kind of 3-4 months down the road from the actual simulation. But it was really fun experiment to do, something hopefully we'll never have to do again.
Yeah, I'm going to disassemble the giant simulation machine back into a furnace because I could really use that now, and I think I used dishwasher parts for it. But I'll put my house back together for this, and I think we'll be just fine. But I'm going to keep the blueprints. By that I mean grainy cell phone pictures, so I can put it back together if we ever need it. But in general, yeah, I think we're all on the same page that it was a great time. It was a success compared to expectations of ourselves.
Yes,
I would agree. So we will end this whole, what is this, like an hour and a half of us patting each other on the back and say, if you enjoy this podcast, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast listening service.
Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all the good stuff. Our blog, grandsumobreakdown.wordpress.com.
If you have any questions, comments, or corrections, drop us a line at grandsumobreakdown@gmail.com or give us a call at 805-613-7866. That's 805-613-SUMO.
For all you people that have been missing Fleric from the past couple of episodes, don't worry. He will be back for the preview. He just doesn't care about Bonskes or the comparison to the simulation to the actual tournament. So he wasn't here for these episodes, but trust us, he still does thoroughly love and care about the sport of sumo. And
his phrasing was he didn't want his apathy to bring down the energy of the episode.
I don't think I could have just summed up Fleric's attitude more perfectly.
Yep. And that preview episode should be dropping in just a couple of days, so stay tuned.
Take it away, JWags.
What do you do when they can't make sumo? You get your friends together and you fake some sumo. Hey, 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 yeah. It's the not so Basho. Not so Basho, Basho, yeah, yeah. Not so Basho. Not so Basho, yeah.